Hello, this is David Bishai, and this is our model of adverse selection lecture, part 2, where we're going to use the model of the basic insurance contract to really dig into the model of how adverse selection happens in these insurance markets. This is going to be relevant to a classic debate on whether we should have experience rating or community rating in the insurance industry. Remember, experience rating, different people pay different rates. It might be discounts for non-smokers. People like experience rating because it incentivizes self-protective behavior. However, we'll see in this lecture that experience rating could erode the base of the insurance cycle, leading to an insurance system death spiral. So this is the point where we'll discover what is this death spiral and how does the insurance contract make this happen. In community rating, everybody pays the same insurance rate. It transfers money from the healthy to the sick. It requires people to say, we're all in this together. And some politicians find that that's an opportunity to challenge the we're all in this together, because there's political gains to be made from saying they are not in it with you, they're not like you, follow me, and let's not be like them. So the community rating approach in insurance offers a little bit of opportunity to exploit some humanity that says, I actually like hating other people or feeling different from them, and I'll follow a politician who's running on that agenda. So the model we're going to cover is called the Rothschild Stiglitz model. Joseph Stiglitz won the 2001 Nobel Prize jointly with Michael Spence and George Akerlof for this. Their prize was for the analysis of markets with asymmetric information. During our studies of economics, the Nobel Prize winning ideas are extremely beautiful and elegant, and they're a little bit difficult, but I think when you see the Rothschild Stiglitz model of insurance markets, I think you'll be impressed with the elegance. You'll have to dig in a little bit to do a little bit of work to grasp it, but I think you'll really enjoy it, and you'll probably understand why the Nobel Committee thought that this was worthy of recognition. So this is a model of adverse selection. Let's define that. Adverse selection occurs because of information asymmetry, where one side of a trade uses their information advantage to exploit the other and ends up destroying the market, so nobody will trade. Akerlof, who also won the Nobel Prize with Stiglitz, wrote a paper about used car dealers who know more about the car they're selling than the customer, and if they constantly rip off their customers, nobody buys used cars, and we get a death spiral. So same in buyers of health insurance. A buyer of health insurance is selling a used car. They're selling their risk, and they're asking for an indemnity from the insurance company in exchange for the premium, but they know more about their health than their insurer. And so they're used cars dealers of their own health, and they could have a problem of adverse selection. On the other side, insurance companies try to do the best they can to do the opposite of adverse selection and do advantageous selection, also known as cherry picking. We can see evidence of cherry picking when we see an insurance company in a managed care organization, or MCO, find new enrollees who come into their system magically having low costs. If you're able to go and pick out new customers who are cheaper than average, good for you. You're going to not have to pay as much out of your insurance funds, and you're going to have a great bottom line. Now, it turns out that if you are cherry picking, looking at the customer's past health, their past claims and utilization, that is the best predictor of next year's expenditure. So historically, insurance companies want to know how many claims you've made. Certainly in the car insurance company, if you've ever applied for car insurance, they are definitely going to check out how many crashes you've had and then quote you a rate. The analogy in the health insurance market is to ask you about your pre-existing conditions or give you a physical exam. That helps the insurance company select individuals that don't look like they're making a lot of claims. Now, cherry picking can be done sort of subtly, beating around the bush. You could advertise your health insurance product in Fitness Magazine. You can put your health insurance enrollment office next to a gym where people are working out. That would work. Or you can set the prices of your insurance products so that really only it's going to appeal to super healthy people. You could set up a lot of hassles in your managed care organization so that in order to get an appointment, you have to be put on hold for 20 minutes, or you have to go through several referral processes. And if everybody knows your insurance company is cheap, but there's a hassle, only healthy people are going to want that insurance. So you're going to have people self-select to your company the way you design it. All right, so now that we've set up the idea of adverse selection and advantageous selection, let's talk about how adverse selection happens. We've got multiple insurance firms competing for customers, and insurance involves a transfer of money from healthy to the sick. So if you're a firm that could find a way to skim off patients who never got sick or rarely got sick, you could do this if, even without screening them for pre-existing conditions, without blood tests, genetic tests, or medical exams, you could give them really, really low premiums. But then you would combine those low premiums with very, very low payouts. You would offer lots of very high deductibles and lots of hassles. And that would give you people who say, I love the low premiums, I'm not going to be sick, so it doesn't bother me that I've got a super high deductible. That leaves the other firms with medium sick and very sick patients, and you've scooped off all the healthy ones by offering them this really cheap, hassle-ridden, high deductible plan. So in this idea, let's take our insurance market to a world where there's just two kinds of people. And part of the genius of understanding the Rothschild Stiglitz model is how simple it is in a world with just two kinds of people. We'll have 1,000 high-risk patients who know who they are, and they know that they have a high probability of an accident. We have exactly the same number of low-risk patients who have a low probability of an accident, P super L. Each of these new customers is going to have a different fair odds lines. We know the formula for a fair odds line, and there'll be one for the high risk and one for the low risk. The low risk patients, they're going to need a bigger indemnity offer because their preferences are going to be preferring the no accident state. So you'll see this, that when we see their utility curves, they're going to be wanting to give themselves assets in the horizontal dimension. The people in the high-risk state, they will want to go more towards the north, and we're going to have to try to find an insurance product that will serve them both. So here's a picture of the two groups. Let's take a minute to see it. We know our old model has wealth W minus D. It has an endowment. This dotted line is the average of the probabilities. It's half of the probability low and half of the probability high. And if we average the probabilities, we get an average fair odds line on the dotted line. And notice that it's halfway between the fair odds line of the high-risk people, which has a slope of -1 minus pH over pH, and it's halfway between the slope of the low-risk people, which has this slope, -1 minus PL over PL. If you think about it, it makes sense that the low-risk fair odds line is rotated towards the right because they are going to have a lower risk, which allows bigger payouts into the accident world and a higher vertical rise over horizontal run. Okay, so that's the offers. We have both types of people, both the high and the low risk people, sitting at their endowment curve. The market comes in and offers some product. Let's see what the products are. So here's the model called the pooling model. This is a version that at point A, we assert will appeal to both groups of people. So there is a insurance contract right there at point A that can be desired and be the best option for both groups of people. First off, notice that it's not tangent to anybody's indifference, anybody's fair odds line. Rather, it is anchored to the endowment of the low-risk people. So what we've done in this pooling equilibrium, we say to the low-risk people, I'm going to offer you product A, which keeps you indifferent between you and your endowment, and I'm just going to let all of the high-risk people buy the product A that you're indifferent to. So the definition of the pooling equilibrium A is it's the intersection between the indifference curve of the low-risk people and the average fair odds line of the community. So we should have no trouble seeing that this product is making the low-risk people the same and the high-risk people better off. Is it stable? Will this product stay stable in the market? Well, here's the thing. If I allow a competing firm B to come into the market, what could happen is that competing firm B is going to appeal to the low-risk people, and they would be better off at point B than point A. Think of the low-risk person on indifference curve, the blue indifference curve. They're going to get more utility moving out here to point B. And so if this market allows an entrant B to come in, there's no longer pooling equilibrium. And the low-risk customers leave point A, going to point B. An insurance firm selling insurance plan A is left holding the risks of only high-risk people, and they ought to be back down here on the high-risk people's fair odds line. But they're not. They're sitting up here at a place where they're going to make losses. This is not the fair odds line you want to have when you're selling to high-risk people. So if B enters and sells product B, we've got trouble. So this average fair odds line is a slope which is a weighted average of the two slopes, and any insurer selling at point A has to make sure that they actually have a 50-50 mix of high-risk and low-risk people. So entrant B is very threatening to the market because it scoops off the customers that have low risk, and it will create a lot of trouble keeping the high-risk people insured in that old product. So the condition for the pooling equilibrium is that it's going to occur at the intersection of the average fair odds line and the indifference curve of the low-risk group that intersects their endowment. It's going to be on the average fair odds line, and it's going to be on the indifference curve of the low-risk group. So let's go back to see it. There it is. Point A, it's a pooling equilibrium. It will serve both customers if we want to have community rating, one product for everybody. It can be designed and it can be found in the economy at point A, but it's unstable if we allow firms to enter at point B or any of these points on this fair odds line below point A. They will destabilize and wreck the market because the low-risk people will go to it and the high-risk people can't be insured by it. So A is a pooling equilibrium, B is attracted to the low risk, but not to the high risk. Quick quiz question for you. So the implication of this model is that there is a hidden cross-subsidy. If there is to be a single insurance contract in the market, what will be inside it is a cross-subsidy from the low-risk people to the high-risk people. And in the pooling equilibrium, the high-risk people are unequivocally better off with insurance, and the low-risk people are just indifferent. They're absolutely exactly the same whether they buy insurance or don't. They don't gain as much. They don't gain anything. So they might experience envy. Again, in competitive equilibrium, we assume there is no envy. but the low risk people might experience it anyway because they're human beings. And if any one of these low risk people doesn't obey our assumption that they are all the same at risk and all the same risk aversion, one or two of them might opt out. And if one or two opt out, there's instability and the premiums might start to go up. And the more the premiums go up in that pooling equilibrium, the more the low-risk people want to opt out. And so we'll start the spiral of people leaving the pooling equilibrium and making its premiums go up until it only appeals to the high-risk group. So the second implication is that the market is unstable. The pooling equilibrium is unstable against an entrant trying to skim off the low-risk type. We're going to require regulation to prevent these entrants. It's unstable against low-risk people who are, assumed to just be indifferent. If they misperceive their risk as lower, they opt out of the pooling equilibrium. Or if some of the low-risk people just have heterogeneity about their risk aversion, if they're just not as risk averse than other low-risk people, say they're younger, they feel more immortal, they'll opt out. And finally, insurance at point A is not profitable without the full participation of the low-risk people, because as low-risk people move out, it's no longer the average fair odds line, and it's above the fair odds line for the high-risk people. So let's go over a different approach to solving this insurance market. Let's talk about a separating equilibrium. We've got two kinds of risk groups. We've got the high-risk people and the low-risk people. The model says that there can be two plans. Let's offer the high-risk people a plan called A sub H, which is their point of tangency between this red curve and their fair odds line. Meanwhile, we'll offer a separate product at point C for the individuals on the low-risk fair odds line. So this is a separating equilibrium where we have product A sub H, point of tangency, the best we could do to the high-risk people. They get product A sub H. And we look at where that indifference curve intersects the fair odds line for the low-risk people, and we offer them product C. Now, the high-risk people get the best possible insurance they can get on their indifference curve schedule, but the low-risk people are constrained to product C, and let's talk about why they're constrained. If a firm tries to offer product C plus to the market and saying, oh, this will be great, these low-risk people will come to product C plus and I'll make a lot of money, unfortunately that doesn't work out, because C plus will also attract all of the high-risk people. And if you get all of the high-risk people at C plus and all of the low-risk people at C plus, you are going to pay out too much. You've got high-risk people on the fair odds line of the low-risk people. So C plus is going to lose money because the higher-risk customers are going to come and sink it with all of their claims. If you try to offer C minus, well, then the low-risk people don't want it because it's not better than C for them. The low-risk people, the indifference curve U sub L is here, and they'd be better off staying at point C. So these entrants for the low-risk market can't do better than point C, and so C is where the market ends up. Okay, so let's take another moment for a quick quiz about the premiums if we start offering these plans, this plan for the high risk and this plan for the low risk in a separating equilibrium. All right, so the conditions for separating equilibrium. In the separating equilibrium, we have a plan for the high-risk agents that is defined as the point of tangency between their highest indifference curve and their fair odds line. And we have a plan for the low-risk agents that is where the high-risk agents' indifference curve intersects the low-risk agents' fair odds line. And you've seen that companies trying to get low-risk business can't offer something better because then it would be sunk, and they can't offer something lower on the fair odds line of the low-risk people because it's just not preferred. It's at a lower indifference point. So in this separating equilibrium, there are two contracts. A sub H appeals to the high risk only. The low risk people can do better at point C, and C appeals to the low risk only. The high risk people are indifferent between point C and A sub H, and entrants can't come in and destabilize it. All right, so if an entrant tried to offer C plus, it couldn't sustain. If an entrant tried to offer C minus, it wouldn't sustain. How about the real world? Well, this artificial world had two risk groups, and so in this artificial world, two separate risk pools made sense. But in the real world, unfortunately, there's not just two. In the real world, there are an unlimited number of risk groups, aren't there? There are super high and medium high and super low and medium low. There's 100 risk groups, honestly. There's 1,000 risk groups. So insurance companies in the real world can keep cherry picking off more and more and more low risk pools. There are so many fair odds lines, about hundreds or thousands of them. So entrants can come in and cherry pick more and more of the lower and lower and lower risks, and they can keep entering. And they enter and cherry pick by offering lower premiums and higher payouts in this accident world. So it's way easier to cherry pick if you can deny coverage to pre-existing conditions. And it's way easier to cherry pick if the regulations were not in place, so that you could keep on cherry picking more and more of the low risk people out. We would leave behind the high risk groups. Those high risk groups would have higher and higher premium as their low risk components began to leave. Risk pools would get smaller and smaller, and in the end of the death spiral, the risk pool is size n equals 1 person per insurance company, which is basically no pooled risk, no insurance. So the death spiral is a problem pointed to in our models of insurance markets by Rothschild and Stiglitz. Let's summarize. So the summary of what we've learned about in adverse selection is that there's going to be information asymmetry. Firms that gain information about risk types could use it to partition the market. They can partition by offering higher price but more generous benefits. Market segmentation can undermine the cross-subsidy from the low risk to the high risk. And ultimately, if we segment enough, we'll have the end of all insurance markets. So which is better? We've covered two different versions of the model, pooling equilibrium and separating equilibrium. Well, which is better? It depends on one's ethical assumptions. In the philosophy of John Rawls, there's a belief that institutions should protect the least well-off, and their Rawlsian ethicists would prefer a pooling equilibria, which is designed to protect the high-risk individuals. However, there are softcore libertarians that really believe in property rights and say that there should not be cross-subsidies between groups. If you own property, you should not have to give it up to anybody for anything that you don't want to. And so they would prefer a separating equilibrium where you are taking your hard-earned property and using it to protect yourself. A hardcore libertarian says no government intrusion in a failed market, period. And if there's no government intrusion in the market, then you have to reject all health insurance because all insurance markets will death spiral without regulation. They cannot pool and they cannot separate. Both pooling and separating equilibrium would give way to death spirals. So a hardcore libertarian must say, I guess I've just got to have no health insurance in my life because I believe that governments should never intervene in markets. That's what a hardcore libertarian is left with. No option for health insurance, and we have to live life under full exposure to risk. So the libertarian, both the softcore and the hardcore, are engaged in what I would say is a little bit of myopia. They would be right if the high risk and the low risk types were fixed for life, and everybody is born a permanent low risk and everybody is born a permanent high risk. However, the libertarians, both hardcore and softcore, are myopic. The fact is that 99% of humans who live long enough are going to spend time in a high-risk group and time in a low-risk group. Age 20 to 50, you're going to be a human who's low-risk. Age 50 to 80, guess what? Bodies decline, and you're going to be a high-risk person if you're lucky enough to be that long. So the libertarian is not engaged in withholding back their property from other people, they are ruling out a transfer payment from their healthy self to their sick self. And they're being unkind to themselves by rejecting the pooling equilibrium, or in the most severe case of the hardcore libertarian, rejecting the existence of health insurance. And they're myopically condemning everybody to have a life where low premiums when young and high premiums when old, if they insist on separating equilibrium. All right, so these political concerns and ethical concerns are important in understanding what actually happens in attempts to regulate insurance markets and to solve them. And that's what we'll be discussing in part 3 of this lecture. Thank you.